Base training checklist, build phase checklist. My first race is in 4 months. That time is going to go flying past. The too long didn't watch, torque, tempo, freestyle torque, sprints, strength work, I hope, seated climbing, extreme hard starts, 0.9 intensity factor rides, town line sprint workouts, and then 4-minute max at the end of rides, and then you're in March. So if you have questions about any of those, this is the video for you, because gone is the day, thank God, of base training is just endurance riding. You don't want to go, don't touch tempo or you're going to ruin your endurance rides. That is the, past 5 years we're going to call that? 4 years? I've kind of lost track. It's just been that same dull thing when I think no one is actually really doing that. If you asked us 10 years ago, we've talked about this on the podcast before, 10 years ago, the training was more of this linear progression of intensity. You started at just endurance, and then you brought in tempo, and then you brought in the magical, the new thing, the new kid on the block was sweet spot, and then threshold work, and then VO2 max, and then you were racing. And we kind of know that's not the right way to do it either, because you don't need to go so dormant for so long. But I will say at the same time, that training did work. You could do that. I think it was really refreshing. We would start base in November, and November, December, zero sprinting, no sprinting. But then once January came around, we did town line sprints. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. What I want to do in this video is lay out, I was talking, these always come up from like athlete conversations. Athlete was talking about, hey, what is base? And I'd said, what's the point of base? And he said, well, I think it would be to build your aerobic fitness. I've heard that on the podcast. I've heard that other places. And I said, correct. I said, what's also the point of base? And he's like, I don't know. I said, well, it's to train for the upcoming season, right? And he's like, yeah. He's like, well, then what am I doing in a build? Because a build seems really short. And I've probably made the error of saying on this podcast, base training, it's 8 to 12 weeks, then you do a build phase, then you go into racing, but you need to be building through base also. And again, we're not really trying to be race ready in base phase or even really in your build. You want to be race ready at your early season races. Sure, I'd love to be ripping at Valley of the Sun in February or Tucson Bike Classic, but I don't want to be so fit that by the time that's in February, March, by the time April comes around, I'm gassed because I was doing crazy hard intervals in January. And for some reason, if that was your A race, maybe you live there, you really want to do all there, maybe you make that sacrifice, but that's bike racing, right? You can't be great for everything. So I think the normal progression for most people is come to the initial races ready to race at 95%, 92%. The other quick thing that we probably won't get into in this video is because nothing sucks worse than training for 3 months, but training a little too easy that you absolutely get your doors blown off and you are now wondering, whoa, wait a minute. I could barely hang on to the group, or there was no chance of me attacking there. How are these people so much faster? Did I really screw this up? So you don't want to put yourself in that situation. But I think we can run through 4 months time that I think this is really applicable. I'm recording this in the middle of October. You could start this in November and you would be going pretty good by the middle of January, and then fiddle with this. I talked to an athlete that he lives in Europe and really isn't going to be doing his big races in June. Really, he's not going to start racing until April. So I said, whoa, it's still nice outside. You still have daylight. Let's not go into the base phase yet. We're not going to start that until January for him. So it's different for every athlete. You want to know when you're going to start racing next year. And then the last thing, let me get off my soapbox here about getting excited about racing. You might be telling yourself, but I don't race. And I love when people say, I don't race. I said, cool, why do you want to get faster? Because I want to beat the dude down my street who thinks he's really fast. That group ride is a bike race. If you are going from point A to point B and you want to be their fastest, that is a race. I love working with athletes that are like, I just want to do like my local thing in town. Cool. And then 6 months later, they're saying, I need faster friends. My friends are so slow. It's training works. So if you are competing in any aspect, consider these things. The very first one I'm going to start off with is torque training. We have blogs about this. I think Landry's made a video specifically about this. You see so many world tour guys doing this. And I'm not saying we got to do what the pros are doing, but torque training, creating more power on the bike is, you will get so much stronger when you are trying to ride a threshold, when you're trying to push big watts at VO2 max. Someone messaged me on Strava and said, did you just take that KOM doing torque training? I took a 2.5 minute KOM just mashing a big gear that I would never mash. And I was actually thinking I would explode halfway through. I've tried that KOM before and have not been able to get it. Torque, and then you could complement that with tempo. Why would you want to ride tempo? I think I have a blog coming out about this. It's not no man's land. You can get some of the similar benefits from torque training. You know, you're doing torque training because you want to try to convert as many fibers as possible to work aerobically. Tempo, that constant pressure on the pedals and resistance, does a very similar thing. And you could do on the weekends freestyle of either of those. Personally, I really enjoy torque training. So I start very short, like 6x6, like just get used to it again. I'll strength train on Tuesday and Thursday, and I'll do torque both of those days if I can. Sometimes on Thursday, by the time it comes to the bike, it's just not happening. I can feel like I'm just not strong enough to do it. That I just make a tempo and then rest. And then I might put in some fartlek. Fartlek means like just as the road allows. I was going to say tempo, torque work on the weekends. Just make sure you're not making every ride torque and tempo. Keep your endurance rides in there also. You only need 1 to 2 hard workouts a week at this point in time. And then in December, you could continue torque work and start adding in your sprints. It's going to be winter time. Sprinting does kind of suck on the trainer. This can be a good time to work on some seated sprints. Brendan, why would I do seated sprints when I'm not going to be sprinting that way? Sometimes if it's a long sprint, or even think of the sprint as like cresting the top of a climb, you're out of the saddle, you're sitting back down, and you're like, oh crap, people are still gassing it. You still have to be able to push really, really hard while seated, and then you back out of the saddle. You could do that on the trainer, that's fine. If you don't want to do sprints at this point of the season, you could add in some over-unders, and those are, again, getting some tempo work and just starting to touch some VO2 max. Now, someone might say, but the term, I don't really hear it anymore, December superstar or January superstar, someone who's trained too hard and peaks way too early. You know, that is if someone is doing threshold intervals on Tuesday, VO2 on Thursday, they're doing big rides on the weekend, they're full on, like, and when I'm saying doing VO2 stuff, they're doing like 5x5, 6x5s, massive sets of 30-30s. They're training like it's June in December. Yeah, it's going to be really tough to get through the whole year. That's why we say, hey, a lot of this is working on your aerobic system, whether it's endurance or all the way up to VO2 max. Just don't do too much of it. It's kind of beyond the scope of this video to get into all the prescriptions. This is more the checklist of things to make sure you're thinking about when to do these and why you would do them. But it's December. You don't have to kill yourself. Throw 1 or 2 of them in, and I would continue the torque work. By January and February, this is where I think a lot of amateurs can miss it because of the overhyped zone 2 of the past years, especially if you're new to training. And I have some experienced athletes that have come to me, man, it is amazing. I'm thinking back to April. They go to these early season races and just get crushed. And I look back at their training for them, and they never went hard really before the race. And like, well, all I hear is everyone's doing zone 2. You have to have intensity if you want to beat your friends or if you want to do a bike race. Like, there's no arguing that. And so the biggest pitfall is just not training hard enough and doing the hard intervals before the first race. Don't make the first race where you're starting to go hard. That sounds terrible, because everybody who's ever done a hard interval, everybody watching this video, the first one after like a month off of not doing hard stuff kind of sucks. He's like, ooh, I forgot how bad VO2 max feels. Ooh, anaerobic stuff. I mean, that's one reason why when I've talked about that limiters video, I do a lot of anaerobic stuff after the season, because I forget how terrible a 1 minute max effort feels. I forget what it feels like to accumulate 8 minutes at FRC over a 2.5 hour ride. The XCO guys watching this video are like, dude, that's like every ride we do. These guys, shout out to the Z Boys, these guys murder rides. Thankfully, my discipline is not that insane. But yeah, if you're not doing some extreme hard starts, and I'm talking like full sprints for 20 seconds into mini threshold, think of a bike race, right? Following a really hard move, do that. You can also put intensity factor. You should probably have it on your screen anyways, just so you're familiar with different intensity factors of different rides. 0.9 for a couple hours. I should look up the exact workout that I give people. It's not like specific, but it talks about like, hey, try to get 0.9 intensity factor for 2 hours. That'll just show you that you're really going hard enough and digging deep. You could then in January, have town line sprints, especially if you're riding and training with friends. This is one of the most mailed in workouts ever. And I think it's unfortunate because it's one of the most beneficial for racing. Whether you're racing for a town line or if you don't have a ton of those. In Tennessee, it was weird where outside of Nashville, there weren't many. So we would use stop ahead signs, which sucks because there's way more of them. But plan a route. Maybe you didn't, designate like 8 or 10 of them. And if you know the course, obviously you know where they're going to be. But once you see one of those signs, it's like, ooh, do I launch now? Is someone else launching? Do I wait a second? And just that reactive time and sprinting when you start getting tired. If you're by yourself, that insane burn comes on and you're thinking, I don't really want to do this that much. But when you're chasing your buddy, you go that extra 5, 6, 7 seconds. That is massive. That's what's going to make you faster. So even Scott McGill was talking about this, of just racing to signs and not necessarily just looking at watts. Who's Luke Lamperty was talking about. Lamperty was talking about that. A lot of his sprint training is from this type of like fartlek sprint training. It's really, really good. And yeah, get that in there in January. And then you might have some races in February. If not, definitely anaerobic training. What is that? It's your 30-second efforts. If it's your 60-second effort, yes, there's still an aerobic contribution to that. So that's why you're doing the endurance rides throughout all of your training always. Your VO2 work is going to help you in an anaerobic like 1 minute effort, because that's soaking up and clearing out all of the fatigue and metabolites and crap that your body produces when you're producing energy through glycolysis, which is what anaerobic power production is. And I'm like thinking where I'm going with this, and let's not even go down that wormhole because we've got other videos on that. And then I would say at the end of some rides, just hit some hard 4-minute efforts or some 3-minute efforts or some, race winning move efforts. Race winning workouts are good to do. I think you want to hit something at the end. And also, this is the time, get your ride hard all day rides in. Quinn Simmons comes to mind when you think about this, just putting in KJs, doing the work. And then my March of ripping. So this is a huge checklist, right? You're like, but I don't, whoa, this sounds like a lot. I might not be able to do all this. You might not. And you might think, wait, dude, I've already got this 1600 watt sprint. I don't really need that. I think I'm going to sub in a couple of VO2 workouts because I really struggle getting going. Or you might be in the other camp, you're like, dude, anaerobic sucks. I get, if we hit a 40-second effort, I'm like with the group for the first 30 seconds and I just die. There's something about that 45-second window. It's like the last 15 seconds of a minute effort really suck. If you get shelled on these short, really sharp efforts, start practicing, training those. I'd start hitting it in December, dial it in with 2 or 3 in January. And then in February, you can see where you're at and maybe do a few more, because those are so fatiguing. It's not like you can't just like brush up on something that you suck at. You actually are going to need to train that. And that might mean that if you're doing those, you might not have enough energy to do like some of the torque stuff. And you can't always do it all. But hopefully this checklist dials in some things besides just, hey, should I just do endurance? No, don't just do endurance. You'll get crushed. Unless you're some genetic freak, you're this amazing athlete, don't listen to me then. You shouldn't be watching this channel. Just do your own thing. But hopefully this helps you suss out and start thinking about, hey, you got a couple weeks until November hits. Okay, what's my November? What's my December? What's my January? That's 3 solid blocks of training. And again, volume would be great, but if winter comes and you can't do it, get on the trainer, watch Landry's last video, commit to a few long rides. I'm gonna have to do that myself here in North Carolina this winter. And then also get focused on the interval sessions that you're gonna do. Again, we're not doing banger, hard, all out stuff, but some of these torque, sprints, it's gonna get you through the winter and make you really strong. That's the point of base training. Get strong as hell, crush people. All right, let's get it. If you need help, hit me up for coaching. We got a ton of training plans, a ton of free blogs, videos. If there's a resource that we're missing, let me know. Love to hear from you. Take care.